So Nick, over to you, my man. What's your thoughts on this subject? Look forward to what you've got to say. Thank you.
I can boil it all down to one word, and it's cowardice.
Yeah.
And that's the real pandemic we've been suffering from 50, 60 years.
Yeah.
It's that slow drip, drip, drip of people taking a half a step back when they shouldn't have moved. And they did it out of personal convenience. They did it out of fear. And they did it because they thought it may be beneficial to them.
Yeah.
So if you're looking at the business world, it would be, well, what's the harm? I don't agree with any of this stuff, but what's the harm? We might as well have a LBGT focus group within our company. What's the harm? It'll give us some brownie points and maybe we'll get some more pink money.
Yeah.
Let's have a Black Asian diversity group as well. We should be splitting people up into colours. I understand that, but what's the harm? Our staff want it, and we might get a little bit more custom from the Black community and the Asian community. So a lot of it started and came from that.
Yeah.
And then I think it went into turbocharge in the UK corporate sector because of the influence of the universities. So, you know, we filled the universities with rubbish degrees and the far left indoctrination, and those people then got jobs in the private sector and knew what to say. They all had those 3 lines, those 3 mantras they could say, and nobody was prepared or had another mantra to repeat back to them that would dispel their mantra.
Yeah.
So, you know, so that's how it started. I think the plus side to this, and I think what's going to happen now, is we're probably going into recession. We're probably looking at a couple of years of hard time now, if not longer. And I don't think businesses will be able to or want to, and their shareholders will not accept falling profits and falling dividends. So I'm hoping a lot of this may be weeded out in the coming 5 years, because the shareholders will want a profit out of this. But it's going to take real leadership. And then you talked about dialogue. People employees in our country now think they have a right to influence the company they work for. They think their opinion actually matters.
Yes.
And most of the time, it doesn't matter. It only matters is when your opinion is about how you make that widget and how that widget could be better, stronger, cheaper, more appealing.
Yeah.
That is beneficial. But when we have members of staff talking about white rage and white privilege and anti-racism, none of that belongs in the work environment in the 21st century UK.
Yeah. Yeah. No, thank you, Nick. That's brilliant. I think I'd hazard caution. I don't think it will be rooted out without some professional development, because negative generalizations are very, very powerful. You can see what happened with Black Lives Matter, the negative generalization of that. You can see anti-racism is a horrible double negative. It's a very, very difficult statement. The label of racism, the whole stuff, the self-righteousness, and psychologically, I think, we've had a period, particularly during the shutdown, where this has escalated. And I think that's because if you do the same thing for 66 days, it becomes a permanent habit. And the problem with a permanent habit, and David would probably shine some light on it with his psychology hat on better than I can, but what danger with a permanent habit is people aren't even thinking, Nick, right? So they're not even thinking, so they're just doing. And so this is actually happening from the CEO down. And I noticed that you're absolutely right. I think the word cowardice is absolutely correct. But the level of courage required and the skills to actually, and the roadblocks, which are multi-dimensional all over the place to prevent people getting to the truth, are very, and it does require, from my experience, I mean, it's pretty much what I do. I bring courage to organizations, and I'm sure you do, and I'm sure you do, Barry, and you, David.
Definitely vanguards going on now that weren't happening before. So finally, the government have come on board the culture war fight.
Yeah.
This has only happened the last year, but they're getting more and more vocal, and they hopefully will start changing things. So we've got the vanguard there. We've also got the vanguard of businesses. Businesses are now beginning to be sued for some of this stuff.
Yeah.
We had a Latin, I think a Portuguese guy working for Sky in the UK, and he was on a some sort of white whatever training, and the trainer said to him, "You must be oppressed because you've got olive skin." He went, "No, I'm not. It's been great in the UK." "No, I don't believe that. You must be oppressed." He just sued him and got 25 grand for racial harassment at the training that was about making sure people weren't racist. So people are and now all these getting. I got interviewed last year by one of the news channels. There was two guys in London in a publishing company, and during one of their training sessions, the CEO said, "I'm not interested in what you used to have to say because you're male, pale, and old or something."
Yeah. Male, grey, and stale, wasn't it?
Yeah, they sued and both got 10 grand each.
Yep. Yeah, that's worth it then, isn't it?
Yeah. So now this is coming into the public for people will start. So that's the second vanguard that businesses will have to compensate and understand is being sued. And the third one is the general public. Black Lives Matter did us a huge favor 2 years ago. And the favor they gave us was to raise all this to public consciousness. Before then, this was just bubbling along. It wasn't a secret. It wasn't, undercover. It was all in the public, but no one cared, and it bubbled along. But they brought critical theories to the masses, and most people went, "I don't like any of this." So that's the third vanguard, and the fourth vanguard will always be profits. It's easy to have this woke nonsense in your corporate company when things are going well, when you've got extra money to waste because profits are looking good anyway. But when your profits start dropping, shareholders won't have it, the owners won't have it when the money they're earning is going down and down. But yet you've got this weekend away to investigate the racism of the peanut because you make peanut butter, and you've got this weekend away now to investigate how many slaves planted peanut. And it's like all that will go once profits start being hit.
The interesting thing is, Nick, there was one of the major purveyors of this particular nonsense was Barclays Bank. Yeah. Right. And they were all sparkles and rainbows and unicorns for years. And originally they got it right. Right. They were doing stuff to support, their staff who were involved. And this year they've gone completely quiet. Nothing. And I think if I remember rightly, they may well have been one of the co-sponsors of the Denton's document, which was the document that was written by the law firm in order to make sure that gender identity was enshrined in law and throughout businesses in the public sector in Britain. It's an extraordinary document if you haven't read it. But when they paid, I believe they partly paid for that. So Barclays were up to their eyeballs, and this year, nothing, not a single thing about pride, not one thing.
And that's because during a boardroom meeting, they decided this gravy train looks like it's coming to an end.
Yeah,
we better jump off this train now before we're pushed off this train and we get damaged. Let's leave now, and hopefully nobody will ever remember we were on this train in the first place.
Yeah, I think though, I'd just a couple of things I'd add to that. I think there's lots of different types of ideology. It's not just around this peculiar sort of identity politics stuff. We've got ideology around technology. We've got ideology around globalization. We've got ideology around a lot of different, crypto, all this sort of pseudo decentralization stuff. And I think the point about there's conflict all over the place. So I think and from a technology perspective, as an engineer, a turnaround expert, a lot of these things are overwhelming, and they don't actually. And we're not very good at undoing things, Nick, as well. With businesses, it's very difficult for us to undo things. The other thing I'd say, I think as well, is that I think that there is an age we need to engage. This quorum need to engage with the younger generation as well. Because there is this has been coming up through the education system, the postmodern thinking, and actually tragically 2 girls in my school committed suicide through vaguely sort of identity related issues, because the challenge with girls is they empathize with each other and they create their own little contagion, because they actually live this thing out, and it doesn't just take one girl out, it takes a lot of them out. So I think the other thing I'd say as well is it's interesting when you look at kids when they're tiny, they're not aware of the color of people's skins. They have no interest in people's sexuality. It's only till you point it out, it becomes a problem. And once you've got that division, they go quiet and they start fighting and alienating people. It's almost immediately destructive. So I think kids are an interesting role model here. And I think there's a generational thing, because I think we're quite lucky in some ways, having seen something else, but it's well worth understanding, I think, that people have come up through the ranks. I've got two daughters, 16 and 18, who have pretty well silenced by this, despite the fact they've got a father like myself, who's seen both sides of the fence. So
the answer to this, and the answer to all those ideological issues we have, regardless of what it is, the answer to all of it is free speech.
Exactly, yeah.
As long as we can, because some of these ideologies will be right.
Yeah.
And none of us are clever enough to be able to pick which ideas are good, which ideas are bad, and which ideas will change the world for the better.
Yeah.
None of us are that clever.
Yeah.
What we need to do is we need to have free and open dialogue.
Yeah.
We need to be able to speak our mind, put our ideas across, criticize other ideas without us risking our life, our livelihood. And then the best ideas will always come through. Daylight is a great disinfectant of poor ideas.
Yeah.
But we're in a situation now where free speech is under attack. But if that's the big battle, because everything else will fall if we can promote and secure our free speech.
So Nick, what do you think? I mean, I've got my view. I totally agree. In terms of what's the action, you're a great business leader, well known. What's the action that you do when you're engaging with organisations to encourage free speech?
I don't think I speak to any businesses we work with about free speech, because what's the point? All I'll be doing is affecting the business I hope to do with them. And at worst, come across as some sort of Trump supporting Fox right-wing Nazi. So it's about picking your fights, and it's about having those general conversations. If a business doesn't want to have free speech, well, that's up to that business. That's up to the CEO, that's up to the shareholders. And I predict there'll be a consequence to pay for that. And if there isn't a consequence, well, I'll be proven wrong and they'll flourish.
Yeah.
They've got to learn these lessons themselves. They've got to see the public mood. They've got to, and again, all comes down to cowardice. Once they see other people engaged in this, they'll say to themselves, right, the fear's over now. I can go back to what I was like in the 80s, where free speech, we can get rid of some of these groups, and all I can concentrate on now is profit and hopefully increase my yearly bonus.
Yeah, thanks, Nick. Yeah, and so just briefly, Nick, from you, in relation, you've shared some stuff recently about the implications on people of getting caught up in this mess. I saw something you shared yesterday. There's some really harsh. What would you say about the consequences of not having free speech that you've observed? It's obviously something close to your heart.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you can see it all the time. I've got friends who work at a local council. Every conversation I have with them is, you won't believe what they're doing now.
Yeah.
I was in training the other day. I had to sit there and keep my mouth shut. I've got one friend who was disciplined for rolling her eyes at a training session a couple of years ago. She was disciplined for rolling her eyes. So that's just the council. You look in other businesses as well. I've got friends in different businesses now who tell me they tell other people now, don't work here. You'll hate it. You've got to watch what you say.
Yeah.
You can't do this, you can't do that. You can't talk about football in the kitchen. You can't talk about your holiday. You can't talk about getting drunk. They tell people all the time, don't work here. It's awful. And there's some of the consequences you'll have when you don't have free speech. And once you have companies who embrace all this, they'll be able to pick and choose the best employees who want to leave all these companies.
Yeah. And
then you'll just be left with the lazy, the incompetent, and the stupid. And let's see how your company runs then.
Yeah, I mean, I think the difficulty with those environments is the wrong people thrive, in my experience, unless the skill set changes, because it's very difficult. If the overwhelming mass behave in that way, it's very difficult to to change that unless you're at the top.
But again, they only behave like that because it's learned behavior and
Yeah.
because most people are sheep.
Yeah.
If you have a new shepherd come along, all those sheep will behave completely differently because they now have a new shepherd.
Yeah.